Hi, this is Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. Welcome to this video technology tutorial.
Formatting cells is easy. Just remember that we never type commas or other characters like dollar signs as material to be appearing in a cell. All of that is the window dressing. That's all done through format cells. So for example, I can highlight cells, whether they contain data or if they're blank, and I can right click over them and say format cells. When I say format cells, I can now choose from one of these formats. If I've never chosen anything, it just says general. Otherwise, I can go in and do number formats, currency, and so on. So I'm going to select something, and I'm going to say OK. One thing to note is because Excel is many times used by accounting people, many times you'll see decimal places will come up to 2 for money purposes. So you may want to turn that down to 0 for most applications that teachers want to work with. Now notice there are some bigger numbers here in this row, and there are no commas appearing. We don't type the commas in. Right click, say format cells. Let's say it's a number. Again, I'm going to turn down the decimal places to 0, and I'm going to turn this option on, use the thousands separator, which is the comma. So if a comma is needed, it does appear. Now don't be nervous if you see these pound signs in here. That simply means that that number is getting too large to display, and rather than showing only part of the number, which could be hiding some significant digits there, and it could confuse everyone, Excel doesn't allow that. It simply points out there's something in there, but you cannot see it all. So you simply stretch out and resize that particular column. Now, here's a trick with decimal places. Now, here's a little trick with percentages. Many times teachers would like to report students' grades as a percentage. Now, mathematicians actually know that 100% is equivalent to the whole number 1 and not 100. So here's the trick. Let's say that I already gave students grades like 100 and let's say 95. If I highlight these cells and I format those cells to be percentages, there's going to be a problem. Well, those numbers certainly are not right. Here's the trick. I'm going to erase those, and I'm going to put them in now. Oh, okay, so in other words, once I have highlighted cells, and I'm going to continue this, I'm going to highlight some blank cells, which is what you really need to do with percentages. I'm going to format those cells as percentages, and again, 2 decimal places is appropriate for a percentage. And now if I type whole numbers like 100 and 95, it works just fine. Now we can do some really interesting things like format fractions. I'm going to say format a fraction up to 2 digits. And now I can simply type, for example, 2 divided by the slash 5, and that is now a fraction. If I click on this and look up in the formula bar, notice it's equal to a 0.4, although I never typed 0.4. And of course, formatting fonts, I can highlight text, and I can grab a lot of those things, those elements right up here from the ribbon, but I can also always format cells, and I can find alignment and fonts and other tools here as well if I wanted to go in that route. Here's a nice thing you can do, and it makes it easier to read spreadsheets in many cases. If I highlight some cells, format them, and I go to the fill, I can put a color around them, and that makes it easier to see. I'm going to be pointing out as we work on spreadsheets, always put material together. Here I'm saying squeeze data together, put it together, make it touch. Now sometimes you have the need to kind of squeeze information together. Notice how this says assignment 1, I can see that up here in the formula bar. I can stretch this out. But notice that while it says assignment 1, that's very long, and the numbers underneath are simply 2 digits. It's kind of inefficient, and I could squeeze more on one screen from right to left, which would be easier for me as a person viewing this later. What I could do is I can highlight these labels. I can right-click, Format Cells, because all the changes are going to be found in the same area, Format Cells. And I can certainly put a color in. I can go into alignment, and I can align and reorient the angle of these pieces. So I can angle them up. I could even go fully vertical if I wanted to. Now I'm going to double click. Now I'm going to squeeze them in a little bit. Notice how I can gain more room for myself, a little more real estate on the screen. Now in this case, I think I'm going to go back in since I have them highlighted already. Format them once again. This time I'm going to orient them to a full vertical or 90-degree position. Now I could squeeze them in a whole lot more. Look how much room I'm now saving on this screen. Oh, a little too much room that time. So there's a little trick to save a little room on the screen. Creating a title on a sheet is probably one of the trickiest things to do in the spreadsheet world. I'm going to type in column A, and then I'm going to highlight across the page as wide as I want to in order to find the midpoint, in order to center. Because if you think about it, when you look at how many columns there are in the spreadsheet, if I simply did what we do in the word processing world and say center by hitting the center button, it would place it way out there, kind of in no man's land, so to speak. So instead, I've highlighted across. I'm not going to press center, but rather I'm going to go down to the merge and center tool. Simply click that tool. Notice it's now centered like it's one big cell whenever I highlight it, and it's now right in the center. I'll do it one more time. I'll highlight across, and notice as far across as you put it, that's going to determine what the midpoint is. For example, if I wanted to center this only over several columns, and I only highlighted that far, that indeed will set that position. Now, let's take a look at multiple worksheets. We found that we were dealing with different worksheets on the bottom, these various tabs. If I right-click over any of these tabs, I have a lot of control that I can gain over them. For example, I can rename a particular tab. I can insert a new sheet by clicking on the Insert button. I can move. I can delete. I can even create a color over one of these tabs. Like I'll make this my hot tab here. It'll be red.